you have probably an agenda, but we're going to flip it and do bills first. And as non-members come in, we will do their bills. But as I don't see any non-members of this committee with a bill in front of us, we will start with committee members' bills. The first one is actually one I'd like to have stricken at the request of Senator Norman, the patron, and that's Senate Bill 254.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I would respectfully ask that we strike Senate Bill 254, ma'am.
Is there a second? Second. All in favor of striking the bill, record your vote, please.
Eleven ayes, 0 nays.
The bill is stricken.
Thank you.
I still don't see any non-members, so let's start with Senator Hanger, Senate Bill 60.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I have Senate Bill 60, which is an amendment to the submission of the capital outlay plans, which modifies the requirements for the governor's submission of bills. We had a bill last year and could possibly have amended it last year to include this provision, but it modifies the date by which the governor has to submit proposed amendments to the capital outlay plan. It's a pre-file bill, and he has to get that information to the chairs of the money committees by the pre-file deadline. So that is what the bill does. I consider it technical in nature to kind of line up the requirements for submission of the amendments by the administration. I think if there are any questions, the Secretary of Finance is here to address that. I think he does support it.
Does the
administration supports
the bill? Okay. Are there any questions or comments to the patron? Seeing none.
I would move to report, ma'am.
It's been moved. Is there and seconded that the bill be reported? Senate Bill 60, all in favor, record your vote.
Hey, George, where's it at? Not there.
11 ayes, 0 nays.
11 ayes, 0 nays. The bill passes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Well, Senator Norman, you have Senate Bill 224.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I have this Senate bill that has been brought, Senate Bill 224, that was brought to my attention on behalf of Gloucester County, which is one of the 13 jurisdictions I have the privilege of representing. And you may recall, taking a walk back through history, what this bill attempts to do is to authorize Gloucester County to increase the sales tax with a earmark that it will be in essence assigned to the public schools to use for school capital improvements. We crossed the Rubicon on this in 2013 when a General Assembly approved a sales tax increase for certain areas of Virginia for infrastructure development to relieve traffic congestion on that. And that resulted because that locality is fairly affluent, but it resulted in a substantial amount of money. I have asked to be distributed a resolution that was adopted by the Gloucester County Board of Supervisors unanimously. The school board has supported it unanimously. The business community is supportive of it. And if you recall, last year we addressed a bill from Halifax, I believe, which was another rural community that was having some issues. that they didn't have the adequate tax base to continue to raise revenues on the real estate to improve their schools. So Gloucester has asked for permission to do this. There is a black and white photograph that is attached to the back of it, and I have the superintendent here if he would come up while I'm babbling. But the purpose of the black and white photographs is to demonstrate that they have enormous mold issues in the schools that they don't have the money to remediate. Come on up here, don't be so bashful. On it, and that is a pressing concern from health issues. They've got dehumidifiers, all kinds of things in there that are not doing it. I do know that one organization has a standard policy against this, but I do think because it's a rural community, it doesn't have the corporate tax base, that this is a viable option. And this is my good friend, the superintendent of Gloucester.
Well, first of all, let me say good morning to each and every one of you, and thank you for having me here. And I thank tremendously Senator Norman for bringing this to your attention. Yes, we are in Gloucester. We are a one high school community, and as you all know, the importance of making sure that we have a safe environment that is a healthy environment for our students is of a critical essence. And our building is roughly coming up on 50 years old at this point in time. And what we're finding is that the infrastructure, considerably consisting of the HVAC, is just not consistent and adequate now to adequately heat and cool our buildings. And since that point in time, we've tried to, get dehumidifiers in. We've had considerable mold tests, and we're doing everything that we can. But we've got plumbing, pipes that are bursting through the walls, seepage that's coming up through the floors, and it's becoming a health risk. And where we are now, we are, facing a dire need to have the appropriate funding to renovate that school so that it's safe and orderly for our students. And one of the things that we're running into, we don't want to get into a situation where we're starting to face some of this now, where some of our community and our parents are looking at possibly taking their kids out of the school because of the health issues. And some of our kids who have not even gotten there yet from the elementary and middle school, their parents are concerned about where their kids are going. And as Senator Norman said, with the tax base, it would create an enormous burden to try to fund the school. We've had a master plan study done for the high school, and to really fund it all the way to a complete renovation would be over $70 million. So we're trying to just come in and make sure that we have the major infrastructure met, and this would go a long way in helping us do that. We're at a critical need now. It's a critical time for us to try to move Gloucester County forward, so we appreciate your consideration of our request.
Madam Chair, can I ask a couple questions?
Yes, Senator
Senator Norman,
Deeds.
maybe, or how many students are in the Gloucester system?
We have about 5,200 kids.
5,200 kids. How much would, can I ask an additional
Yes,
question?
Senator
How much
Deeds.
would one penny raise on the sales tax in a year?
Well, we get in sales tax, 1% is roughly about $4.8 million. 1 cent in Gloucester is roughly about 400,000.
Madam Chair, since we passed this last year for Halifax County, have they held a referendum in Halifax County? And do you know the result of that?
Yes.
No idea?
I do, yeah. They had a referendum in Halifax, and it passed by about 72% of their voters.
And Madam Chair,
Senator Deeds.
you have a commitment from the Board of Supervisors to have a referenda in Gloucester County.
Yes, the Board of Supervisors, the school board, our Chamber of Commerce is in support. The Economic Development Authority is also in support. So we've got the support that we need to think that we can get it done.
Any further questions or
Madam Chair.
discussion?
I
Yes,
just,
Senator
if I may
Senator
add, Madam
Peterson.
Chairman, just following up on Senator Deeds, I would say the Gloucester County Board of Supervisors unanimously supported this, and they are a very conservative group. Excuse me.
Senator Peterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. When I ran for the House of Delegates 18 years ago, this was actually an issue in Fairfax County. And I guess, and it was rejected by the General Assembly, not by this body, but across the hall. And I guess my question is, since I'm new to this committee, what is the threshold going to be about which counties are allowed to enact a sales tax and which counties are not? Because it seems to me pretty much at some point, every county in Virginia is going to start coming in here wanting to do this at some point.
Madam Chairman, I would respond to the senator by saying, I don't disagree with you, but we seem to be and I'm not being confrontational here, but we seem to be dealing this year with some local discretion and alternatives, such as enacting ordinances in other areas. And I'm not saying this confrontationally. And I don't think that we are in a position to pass a statewide bill at this point. The rural communities, and particularly a number of them I represent, just do not have a tax base other than real estate. And other counties that are more affluent or have a corporate tax base, like some others I represent, can raise the real estate tax and get a meaningful result on it. So I understand what you're saying. I don't know what the threshold is. I think one of the things we have to do is look at the relative wealth and the relative tax base.
Any further questions? Yes, Senator Hanger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. More of a comment to explain the position that I will take on this bill as I did last year with Halifax. And I irritated a couple of my friends from Halifax last year, so I guess I'll irritate a couple of my friends here. But
Yeah, but I can pay you back.
okay, right. And so my comments aren't meant to, my comments really aren't meant to impede this bill. It's just where I'm at this, and it's a matter of tax uniformity throughout the state. 18 years ago, I worked on the Streamlined Sales Tax Project, which kept taxes simple in Virginia and across the nation. That's what we were working on. The upshot of that is now that we have the internet sales tax, which, because we kept things simple, it's good for the business community, it's good for everyone. The rural communities, we all know, the rural communities in the Commonwealth are suffering because of the lack of resources to fund vital services, notably education. So what we're doing here is kind of shooting, as rural areas that have lesser ability, shooting ourselves in the foot by doing this hodgepodge. We should be enacting a statewide sales tax increase, if we're going to do this, of a penny, and running it through the composite index so that these rural localities benefit more, and the more affluent localities obviously don't benefit as much if Fairfax decides they want to do it and keep the money themselves. So that's where I'm at. I think we need to address that overarching issue sooner rather than later, and I agree, Senator Norman, probably not this year, but we need to be talking about that rather than just Gloucester being able to glean $400,000 out of the pockets of their citizens, running it through the composite index uniformly statewide. Thank you.
Yes.
Senator Hanger, I will invite you to introduce that bill next year, and I will be very supportive.
Okay.
It's, I think, obvious that, not counting your comment about Fairfax, which I don't agree with, that this is an issue school construction and renovation is something we're simply going to have to look seriously at. And I'm hoping before the end of this session to be able to set up at least a Senate work group to be looking at it, and hopefully a joint one, but we haven't gotten that far yet. So I can't remember, is there a motion on this bill?
Madam, I don't know. Did you want to speak? Sorry. I don't know why I didn't invite you up, but in the sense of fairness.
Quite all right. Absolutely. Good morning, Madam Chair and members. I'm Katie Boyle with the Virginia Association of Counties, and just here to register support for the bill. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Senator Eben.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to share that this issue of mold is a huge problem, not just in your county, but in one of our more affluent counties now, cities in Alexandria. We have students who've done testing. We've had teachers who've retired because of the exposure, at least that's what they've said. And it costs a lot to remediate this mold. And we've had kids have to not use their classrooms or a classroom in particular, till it was remediated. I've got them coming down on a different bill that you may want to get on. But it doesn't provide the money. My own community, even though it's perceived as much more affluent, and it is, to renovate these schools, all the needs that there are is huge. Even in a community like Alexandria that has a lot of Section 1 lunch kids, So I just wanted to share that this is a really big issue.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Senator Deeds, followed by Senator McClellan.
Thank you. I second.
It's been moved and seconded. Senator McClellan, did you have further comments?
Quickly, not to belabor the point, but this is an issue everywhere, and it's
Sure.
an issue that's been going on for a long time. We've had at least 2 studies statewide that have shown the number of school buildings that are over 50 years old. It's not just mold. In Charles City County, what keeps our superintendent up at night is when is the chiller going to go out? So we do need to address it, and I just wanted to make the point, this is everywhere, and we need to address it soon. But in the meantime, we need to help each community as they come forward.
Madam Chairman, I just would say, and not argumentative, Charles City County was blessed with waste management. And I don't mean from the product there, but they were able to build an entirely new school system not so many years ago from the tipping fees from waste management. And I live right next to it, so I know they have the issues, but they don't have that cash cow to do that. And I don't mean that argumentatively at all.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to report Senate Bill 224. All in favor, record your vote. Aye. Opposed, no.
Would you vote me, Madam Chairman? Please.
Vote you no?
No, yes. No.
13 ayes, 2 nays.
Thank you very much.
The bills are reported 13 ayes, 2 noes. We'll go now to I see there are Senate Finance and Appropriations Committee members here, so we will go to them. But before we go to Senator Spruill, Senator McDougal has asked that Senate Bill 518 be passed by for the day, and without objections, we will do that. Senator Spruill, here you go.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Members, good morning. Madam Chairman, present Senate Bill 163, and I also have 559. 559 and 163, they're the exact same bill. I don't know how they got mixed up, so could we just strike 559? They're the exact same bill.
I guess we have to, that's a recorded vote. So is there a motion to strike? It's moved and seconded to strike. All in favor, please record your vote.
That's 559.
Okay.
Sixteen ayes, 0 nays.
The motion to strike is 16-0. The bill is
Thank you, Madam
stricken.
Chairman. Now it's Senate Bill 163. Madam Chairman, Senate Bill 163, enticement is sales tax revenue for certain public utilities authorized in local and facilities and summit. What the bill does, it adds the city of Chesapeake to the list that are authorized to issue bonds for the construction of public facilities and to retain sales and use tax revenue generated within the facilities. It adds outdoors amphitheater to the list of defined public facilities. Extended July 1, 2024, deadline to issue such debt under this statute. Important support and boosted the realization of development for the Summit Point development. The Summit Point development, Madam Chair, is a mixed community housing, Dollar Tree, corporate headquarters, office, and retail and residence. If you could find Chesapeake from Norfolk, Dollar Tree, which moved into our area, the first development, that is the only building that we have in Chesapeake that's over 6 stories. And Chesapeake, nothing over 6 stories. So if you want to find Chesapeake, you go to Norfolk on the 12th floor in the mayor's office, look over in the woods, you got one building sticking out of the woods. That's Dollar Tree. The development represents a project investment of over $300 million, and Chesapeake is interested in partnering with Dollar Tree to construct an outdoors facilities. It will be highly benefited for these projects if the bond insurance deadline will be extended to July 1, 2024. Also, Madam Chair, I have someone from Chesapeake to speak, if you don't mind.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, committee members. Jeff Gore on behalf of Chesapeake City Council. This is one of the council's top priorities for the session. As the senator has explained, this is a public-private partnership economic development project. It's really unique to Chesapeake, given that they don't really have a downtown area, as the senator pointed out. This is going to be a campus complex in partnership with Dollar Tree. They've already built a new corporate headquarters there. The city is investing over $30 million in public infrastructure, including building new parking garages. So this is a real unique opportunity. Chesapeake just wants to have the same authorization that 14 other localities already have. And so that's what the bill does. Thank you.
Are there questions? I can remember when he was chairman, John Chichester, the first one of these 15 came up and he said, we do this and we're going to do it again and again. And he was right, but I think this is worthwhile. So. Oh. Staff is asking if the bill you struck was the one that had Cosgrove as co-chief patron. Would you like to have him included on this one?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I like him, so he's all right.
Okay, there will there will need to be a substitute. So the motion will be to adopt the substitute. Yes.
Madam Chairman, I would move to adopt the substitute, which we understand.
Second. It's been moved in second. We adopt the substitute. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. And now we can have a motion to report as amended.
Madam, I would
As a
move to
substitute.
report the substitute as presented.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor of the bill, please record your vote. All opposed, likewise.
Sixteen ayes, 0 nays.
The bill passes unanimously, 16-0.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning to all.
Thank you. Senator Bell, you have Senate Bill 273.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. First, there's a line item amendment for an enactment clause. I would ask the clerk to report that.
Madam Chair, Senator Bell, the line amendment is just to provide for continuity in terms of this existing classification. So it would be on line 246 after such chapter to add an enactment clause that says that the act's effective as of January 1, 2019, which is when the classification currently expires.
Madam Chair,
Is there a motion to adopt the technical amendment? It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye opposed. It's adopted.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This bill is a pretty simple one. Frankly, excuse me for doing the enactment clause first without explaining it, but I want to make sure I didn't forget the enactment clause. But the bill basically just extends the sunset of allowing the county to offer a lower tax rate to a satellite facility that manufactures, test, operates satellites. It's a risky business, and frankly, we need to do this to keep this business cost effective. And there, it's 1,700 jobs. It's formerly the Orbital Sciences campus, which is on Route 28. It's now owned by Northrop Grumman. These are, again, high-paying jobs. It puts us in a really great place to attract and keep these jobs here. This doesn't affect the state taxes. It's only the Loudoun County tax rate, and Loudoun County supports this bill. They definitely want to keep this facility there. I've toured this facility. It's top-notch, first class. Again, really puts us in a place where we are manufacturing and testing some of the most complex equipment made today. And it's a good thing to do. Basically, this just allows them a little bit lower tax rate, and by doing that on their property tax, it puts them in a position where they can continue to operate the facility. The extension on this is from 2019 to 2029, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you've got.
Are there questions about removing the sunset?
I'd move to report, Madam Chairman.
Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded that the bill be reported. All in favor, please record your vote.
Sixteen ayes, 0 nays.
The bill passes 16 to nothing.
you.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Madam
Is
Chair
this
and
your
the chair.
first bill?
I did get one the other day, but it squeaked. This is my first one that was clean, so I'll take this one. Thank you, ma'am.
Congratulations. Okay, let's see, Senator Ruff, you have Senate Bill 255.
Thank you. Senate Bill 255 is before you at the request of the Prince George Board of Supervisors. They would like to put themselves in the same posture as the Williamsburg area. Kind of a Christmas tree, want to be one of the ornaments, marketing themselves as an overnight tourism destination. Prince George is somewhat of a satellite of Hopewell, Petersburg area, does not have a whole lot of business going for them, and this would help them build on the plantations that are in the area.
Madam Chair,
Senator Peterson.
is the historic triangle is currently which jurisdictions?
James City,
Madam Chairman, the city of Williamsburg, James City County, and York County.
Further question. Is Prince George is not contiguous to those counties, is it?
only by the river.
Well, you got to go down the river a bit to get there,
No,
don't
just
you?
go across the river, that'll get you there.
Senator Peterson, did you have a
Okay.
further question?
I guess my next question would be, I mean, there's going to be a lot of counties that are going to be contiguous to these jurisdictions. Are we going to put any limit on this?
Madam Chairman, I think that's the option of the General Assembly, how many ornaments on a Christmas tree.
Madam Chairman.
Senator Norman.
I have to accept some complicity because many years ago I started this, and one of the caveats that we had to deal with in order to initially get these through is that the money had to be dedicated to a tourism-related promotion, and in this instance, of course, it is doing to promote overnight tourism. And I can just say in the Historic Triangle, it has been a significant success because it enhanced the advertising dollars before we had the Historic Triangle assessment last year, which has been very, very effective. But some localities are just not as fortunate as others. And so we had met with some success, even though at Christmas tree, as long as the money was dedicated.
Madam Chair?
Senator Peterson.
And I apologize for showing so much interest in this because it's a little bit outside my area, but it also speaks to a sports facility. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong one. All right.
Well, Madam Chairman, they have spent a lot of effort in trying to attract recreational softball and baseball and all that.
Are there further questions?
Madam Chair?
Senator Evan.
And maybe this is for staff. Do the other transient occupancy tax add-ons for different localities, do they require that they're intended to attract visitors for an overnight stay, or can they just promote other things that someone would come to do for a day?
Madam Chair and Senator Evan, I think that all of the additional transient occupancy taxes that are out there require that the additional revenue is dedicated to tourism and overnight tourism in some way and marketing toward that.
Okay. I have a motion at the appropriate time.
I'm sorry.
I have a motion at the appropriate time.
Okay. Is there anyone else? Does anyone in the public? Senator Hanger.
Thank you.
This one, of course, with what Senator Norman has referred to as the Tommy tax down in Williamsburg, I think. But it also speaks to a broader issue that we're trying to deal with this year, Madam Chair, in terms of equalizing taxing authority for the counties. But it raises the issue that we're going to have to address in that legislation if we actually pass that, is that we're probably going to have to look at some uniform caps because there would not be any in place if we don't do that. And I'm not speaking against the bill at all because it probably should advance if that's what they want to do there. But it does, hopefully we can address this broader issue with the uniform taxing authorities for counties.
Thank you. Okay, does anybody in the public wish to speak to this? Yes.
Good morning again, Madam Chair and members. Katie Boyle with VACO again, here to support the bill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Robert Melvin with the Virginia Restaurant, Lodging, and Travel Association, and we're supporting this measure.
Thank you. Okay, now a motion.
Madam Chair, I would move to report.
It's been moved and seconded that the bill be reported. All in favor?
15 ayes, 0 nays.
It passes 15-0.
Thank you, Madam
Thank you. Now, the last bills are mine, so I'll hand the gavel over to.
All right, Madam Chair, Senator
Thank
Howell.
you. I have three bills here today. The first one is Senate Bill 107. Senate Bill 107 is quite simple. It simply removes the sunset clause on the Arlington transient occupancy tax. Those of you who've been on the committee know some of the history of this. We have consistently got it out of the Senate unanimously, only to hit the shoals of a grudge in the House of Delegates. We have with us today the chairman of the Arlington County Board to speak to this.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, Senator Barker, and members of the committee. I'm Christian Dorsey of the Arlington County Board. We strongly support SB 107. We're joined by the Chamber of Commerce, who you'll hear from earlier. Chair Howell spoke to this bill's simplicity, but I certainly think that this bill is quite important. The surcharge by law is required to fund tourism and travel promotion in Arlington County, and industry, the hospitality industry collectively provides $125 million in tax receipts to the entire Commonwealth. Arlington is poised to capture an even greater share of visitors to the National Capital Region, yet that cannot happen unless we have a sustained investment in travel, tourism, and promotion. This surcharge, currently subject to a sunset, provides for that investment, and the work with our hospitality community to come up with a long-range plan to grow those visitors is very much conditioned on removal of the sunset. So by removing the sunset, you can also free your future dockets from reconsidering this issue every 2 to 3 years. And by removing this sunset, you will be treating Arlington just like all of the other jurisdictions in the Commonwealth where a surcharge is authorized. This is a case where we don't want to be exceptional. So I thank you very much for the opportunity to speak this morning and for your consideration of the bill.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, Senator Norman. We look forward to not seeing him again in the future.
Hi, good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Chris Raines, GM at the Holiday Inn Roslyn Key Bridge, and also Chair of the General Managers Committee with the Arlington Chamber. Just briefly, we are the ones being taxed, and we support the bill. Thank you.
Madam Chair, Scott McGarry. I'm a past chairman of the Chamber from 1994. Have spoken in favor of the underlying authority ever since the Chamber requested it back in 1990, and hope very much it'll be your pleasure to report the bill. Thank you.
Good morning again, Mr. Chair and members. Katie Boyle with VACO. We also support the bill. Thank you.
Good morning. Robert Melvin with the Virginia Restaurant Lodging and Travel Association, and we are also supporting the bill.
Any questions of committee members?
Mr. Chairman, I would move to report.
We have a motion to report, a second for that? Yes. If there's no further discussion, we'll proceed to the vote.
Ayes, 0 nays.
All right, you're on a roll, Madam Chair. So,
Yes. The next one that I'd like to do is Senate Bill 577. We require the governor and administration to put forward a 6-year capital outlay plan for projects that need to be that they are proposing or considering. And this just updates that 6-year capital plan.
all right, is there anyone?
It comes in every year, basically.
Yes.
Excuse me.
Anyone have any comments or questions for the patron? Is there anyone from the public who wishes to address this? All right.
Excuse me, I would just say the administration strongly supports this bill. Thank you.
All right,
I would
thank you.
move to report,
All right,
Mr.
there's a motion to report. Is there a second? All right, we got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All right, we will proceed to the vote.
16 ayes, 0 nays.
Motion passes.
Thank you. And I have one more, and that's Senate Bill 211. This deals with third-party settlement organizations. You might ask, what is a third-party settlement organization? It's an organization that provides a platform, so it would be like Uber or Lyft or Airbnb, one of those types of organizations. Currently, they report to tax when they have at least $20,000 and 200 people involved on their platform. This bill would change that to making it the same as a standard 1099.
Any
And
questions?
there are people to.
Senator Hanger.
Thank you,
back
Mr.
me
Chairman.
up.
Senator Howell, do you know, or does anyone here can help with this, is the assumption made in this revenue estimate that nobody is currently reporting that?
No, sir. First of all, administration strongly supports this bill. There's inconsistencies now. There are companies that are doing it the way, for instance, a contractor would do with his employees under the 600, the 1099 miscellaneous. Others doing it the other way. This is trying to get everybody being reported consistently. So the revenue estimate is an estimate of those who are not reporting it this way now.
Okay, Mr. Chair.
Yes,
Chair.
Senator Hanger.
But further, Mr. Secretary, is the revenue estimate based on the fact that, in other words, they're not reporting on 1099, but some people, if they get $1,000, will feel honor bound to report it?
Yes.
Versus others who won't report it unless they know the IRS knows about it?
We're not starting from zero, no, sir. We're estimating this would be the impact of the bill.
Okay.
Of the bill, for those who we think should be doing it. By the way, the federal government's looking at this also as a way to make sure we're doing it consistently. It's basically what's happening with the gig economy. I'll compare it to what we did with internet sales. The tax last year, as we move, people move, that's what's happening in our economy, and this is just making sure we're being consistently applied as we do other types of retailers or others that are not considered these third-party settlement organizations.
Thank you.
All right. Anybody want to testify to this?
Robert Melvin with the Virginia Restaurant Lodging and Travel Association. We are in strong support of this measure and ask that you do the same. It's going to bring some parity to this issue and ensure that everyone is held to the same standards and help eliminate confusion on this matter.
Thank you. Any other public testimony? Senator Evan.
Yeah, this is a question maybe for Secretary Lane. Are the companies, this is about the companies, but are the individual drivers' shares being reported by the companies now?
If the company They're reporting whatever the company gives them. So if the company gives them a 1099K, that's what they're using as their threshold. If it's a 1099 miscellaneous, that's what they're using with their threshold. So it's being reported through that mechanism. So again, we don't have consistency between different organizations and how they're doing it.
And this bill has to do with the actual organization, though, Lyft or Uber or whoever their competitor is, rather than drivers. That's totally separate.
That's correct. The drivers may be
They're okay.
impacted but they're supposed to be reporting their income anyway, right? In other words, whatever they get over 600, they're supposed to report. I won't mention the names of one, but one of those entities is using the 1099 miscellaneous. The other one's using the 1099K. They should be using the 1099 miscellaneous. This is making sure that everybody's being consistent.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Senator Barker, there is a technical amendment that perhaps.
I was just going to say, there's a line amendment listed on the agenda, so.
Okay.
Mr. Chair and Senator Howell, there are 6 line amendments which are identical, which would be to change the references to Section 6050W of the Internal Revenue Code. There shouldn't be a parenthetical around the letter W, so on lines 15, 17, 19, 22, 25, and 36, the amendment would be to change that.
All right, the motion is to adopt the amendments here. Is there a second? All right, any discussion? All in favor say aye. Say aye. All opposed, no. The ayes have it, the amendments are adopted. Is there anything further anybody wishes to say or question? All right, we have a motion to report as amended. Is there a second? All right, is there any further discussion? If not, then we will proceed to the vote.
16 ayes, 0 nays.
And Madam Chair, you may resume your chair up here, so.
Thank you, committee. Let me just check to make sure we have now completed we've completed all the bills on the docket. Okay. Then next we will hear a report from JLARC about presumptions.
Good morning. My name is Drew Dickinson, and I was the project leader for JLARC's review of Virginia's workers' compensation system and disease presumptions. And I was asked to give just a brief 10-minute high-level summary of some of our findings related to disease presumptions for public safety workers. I can do it in 10 minutes, but if you have any questions, feel free to ask me. I'm happy to answer them. And before I get started, though, I wanted to let you know that this will be a high-level summary, but there's much more detail in our final report. That's available online, and but we can get you a hard copy if you'd like that as well. I'll click it. You're welcome. All right, so it's a little bit of background. Disease presumptions established in law a presumed causal connection between an occupation and a disease. They're used by states to make it easier for workers in certain occupations, particularly public safety occupations, to help them obtain benefits in situations where proving the causality of their disease would be difficult or impossible. And so workers who are covered under a disease presumption are not automatically eligible to receive benefits. Instead, they must meet certain requirements and their employer has the right to present evidence to counter or rebut the presumption. And as part of our overall study on Virginia's workers' compensation system, our team was asked to review the appropriateness of Virginia's disease presumptions and the requirements to claim and rebut them. We partnered with epidemiologists from the Johns Hopkins University Bloomberg School of Public Health to help us understand the medical research surrounding Virginia's disease presumptions. The Johns Hopkins team of epidemiologists analyzed and summarized the existing research on Virginia's existing and proposed disease presumptions. They found 83 relevant studies and evaluated each study for quality and for potential bias. In the next slide, I'll very briefly summarize their findings regarding Virginia's cancer presumption for firefighters and the extent to which the research indicates there could be an association between that occupation and the cancer. So the Johns Hopkins team determined that the existing evidence indicates that firefighters are at increased risk compared to non-firefighters for 6 types of cancers that are either currently presumed in statute to be caused by firefighting or that were proposed during the 2019 General Assembly session. The strength of evidence of increased risk among firefighters varies across the 6 types of cancers that are on the far left. And the figure actually lists the cancers in order of the strength of evidence that they found. For example, the strongest evidence of a connection was found for prostate cancer. And for the remaining 4 types of cancers evaluated, there was either insufficient evidence to conclude there could be an association between firefighting and cancer, or that no research had been conducted on that cancer and firefighting. This doesn't mean that a connection doesn't exist. It just means that the evidence makes it difficult to determine whether they are at greater risk of these cancers than non-firefighters, or that just research has not been conducted. This is a very high-level summary. If you're interested in more information behind these findings, Chapter 4 of our final report provides that. We also worked with Oliver Wyman Consulting to estimate the costs of adding presumptions. And according to their analyses, the addition of brain, colon, and testicular cancers, as was proposed in 2019, is expected to result in about 6 new compensable claims statewide per year. And so the employer workers' compensation premiums are expected to increase by up to $269 per firefighter in the first year. To the extent that workers are also determined to be eligible for Line of Duty Act benefits, employer costs for this program would increase as well. And as with the prior slide, Chapter 4 of our report provides more details on these cost estimates. And there's no specific criteria available to determine when a presumption should or should not be added, other than that a plausible connection should exist between the occupation and the disease. And so ultimately, the decision to add or remove a presumption is a policy decision for the General Assembly. And Chapter 4 of our report provides information that we hope is helpful in making that decision. Our report notes that the existing research literature provides some support for adding brain, testicular, and colon cancers to the list of cancer presumptions. We also provide an option to create a sunset provision for those cancers with insufficient or no evidence at this time, knowing that there will be better data on firefighting cancer associations in the near future. Our study also reviewed the requirements that firefighters must meet to establish the cancer presumption and found them to be unreasonably burdensome. Most cancer claims that were disputed at the Virginia Workers' Compensation Commission between 2009 and 2018 resulted in firefighters not receiving benefits. And about half of these claims were denied because firefighters could not prove their exposure to a specific carcinogen that caused their particular type of cancer. And according to Johns Hopkins researchers, meeting this requirement is very difficult and can be very costly. We recommend that the General Assembly modify this requirement to allow that firefighter to be eligible for the presumption if they can document that they were exposed to hazardous conditions, such as responding to the scene of an active fire or investigating a fire. There are 19 states that have some kind of exposure requirement for their cancer presumptions, and 8 states allow firefighters to show that they were exposed to hazardous conditions. Virginia also has a 12-year service requirement for firefighters to be eligible for the cancer presumption, and the service must be continuous. Our study found that this requirement is inconsistent with the scientific research and is actually the longest of 29 states with a single service requirement for the cancer presumption. Other states' service requirements generally range from 1 to 10 years, with 5 years of service being the most common. And according to Johns Hopkins researchers, the current requirement that the service be continuous doesn't align with existing research, and only 3 other states require that the service be continuous for their cancer presumption. So we recommend that the General Assembly reduce the years of service requirement for the cancer presumption from 12 years and remove the word continuous from statute. And this slide just summarizes the report's recommendations to address the cancer presumption requirements that I just went through. Our team also reviewed the Virginia's cardiovascular disease presumptions for public safety workers. And the Johns Hopkins team determined that the best available research offers some support for Virginia's cardiovascular disease presumption, and found that several studies indicate that the risk of cardiovascular disease among public safety workers increases with length of service. We found that 16 of 34 states with the cardiovascular disease presumptions have service length requirements, and that most of these states use 5 years. Currently, Virginia does not have a service requirement for their cardiovascular disease presumption, and adding a length of service requirement would reduce the risk that employers are required to pay for non-work related diseases. Lastly, we're also asked to review the appropriateness and costs of a proposed PTSD presumption for public safety workers. Our study found that under current case law, Virginia public safety workers have been denied benefits for PTSD when it's caused by a single traumatic event because the Workers' Compensation Commission and the Court of Appeals have determined that the circumstances that caused their PTSD could have been expected given their job responsibilities, training, and/or experience. Our interviews with public safety stakeholders indicate that this is the key reason why the PTSD presumption was introduced last year. But the report notes that instead of establishing a presumption, the General Assembly could modify statute to allow for psychological injuries, such as PTSD, to be compensable, even if the situation could have been expected. So this would be a more direct approach to addressing the stakeholder concerns than creating a presumption. This slide provides a summary of the estimated costs of the PTSD presumption. You'll see the estimated number of new claims vary widely, as do the costs. This wide range is primarily due to uncertainty in terms of the actual incidence rates of PTSD among public safety workers. And if you're interested, more details on these cost estimates are also available in Chapter 4 of our final report.
Madam Chair, I just want to ask a question about the mechanics of how a workers' comp claim works for these presumptions. And I assume that, let's say I contract some form of cancer and I had been a firefighter, for example. Mm-hmm. And if the presumption's in my favor, then I just file the claim and the burden is on the state to come forward with an expert witness and show that it's not that case, correct?
So it would be, the Workers' Compensation Commission is like a court, is an administrative court.
Right.
So they would file a claim with the insurer, and if the insurer denied the claim for cancer, they could go to the commission, and then in the administrative court, if they met the requirements, they would be presumed, their cancer would have presumed to have been caused.
I understand that, but when you actually try the case, the doctor that would be testifying would be on behalf of the state. In other words, they would have the burden.
They should, if they meet the requirements. One of the things that I mentioned is that to even be presumed to have contracted cancer through firefighting, currently firefighters are required to document that they've been exposed to a specific carcinogen that caused their particular type of cancer. And so they're not even getting to the presumption. And so we're recommending that that requirement not be the case, so.
Okay, further question, Madam Chair. Let's say if you don't have a presumption. If you don't have a presumption, but you still file a workers' comp claim, then the claimant eventually, if the case is litigated, would have to bring in the expert who would have to prove proximate cause.
That's correct. The claimant would have the burden of proof. Madam Chair, this last slide just summarizes at a high level some of our report's key findings regarding Virginia's disease presumptions that I just went through. In the interest of time, I won't read through them, but I'm happy to answer any other questions that you all may have.
Are there further questions? Senator Marsden and Senator Hanger.
Thank you. A bill has already been passed out of Commerce and Labor with regards to this, and one of my concerns around PTSD was the fact that it seemed to be that the diagnosis could be made by one medical professional, either a clinical psychologist, social worker, physician, whatever, and whether the state or whether the individual has chosen that person to do the diagnosis. A one-person diagnosis of a somewhat subjective illness, unlike cancer, which is determined by a biopsy, this would be determined more by someone's professional experience and opinion. And my concern is, after the fact of getting the bill out, was that if you had a Dr. No working for the state, or if an individual had an individual that was inclined to have a reputation for approving PTSD, that only allowing one person to make that diagnosis might be tricky. And just before the bill, I know, is coming to finance, some thought probably needs to go into a mechanism for looking at the possibility of more than one individual looking at this case to make sure that it is not wired in one direction or another, and that you get a balance of opinion, because the number of cases there are considerable, and we want to make sure that the process is clean. And that's, I guess that's one of those "isn't that so" questions, but that would be my concern.
Well, and I'll just point out, what we're recommending is that public safety workers be treated like every other worker, and that their PTSD can be compensable, even if they could have expected the conditions. And so it doesn't speak to the mechanics of how that diagnosis would happen. But
Senator Hanger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Basically, two questions. One dealing with the cancer presumption. The bill that came out of committee the other day, I think it was Senator Saslaw's bill, did it largely comport with the assumptions you made or the cost estimate that you gave on that?
I think it's pretty much identical to the one that was proposed last year, and so I think it would.
Well, it was different, but it actually in a way that's more reasonable that I think, in terms of the way it came out. But the cost estimate you gave would probably cover.
I think if it's adding the three cancers, it would comport with our analysis.
Okay, all right, Madam Chair.
Yes,
Then on
Senator
the PTSD, you have, based on one bill, you had an assumption of cost which was relatively reasonable there, as I see it, although there's a wide range. The bottom line is the first number is reasonable, I suppose. Mm-hmm. Have you looked at the bill that came out of committee the other day that's in our bosom here? And if you haven't rendered a cost estimate on that, would you be able to do that relatively quickly?
So there are a couple bills that came out. One was to establish a presumption, and one that would not create a presumption, but it would.
Senate Bill 741, I think it was Senator Vogel's bill, actually, which it appeared to me that bill didn't comport with the assumptions you made in that cost estimate you made there.
So yes, this is based on a presumption being established, and that the one Senator Vogel's bill is not creating a presumption, and so would not have the same number of people getting benefits, because it wouldn't be automatically presumed to. Okay. They would have to present their evidence. Like every other person.
I'm sure I'll just follow up later with that one, because
Okay.
I think we're going to have that bill here shortly.
Senator Eben and then Senator Vogel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for the presentation, and I just wanted to follow on Senator Marsden's question with two follow-ups. You said treat him like every other worker. How is every other worker diagnosed with PTSD? That's with one? Is that how it goes?
I think there's a panel. There can be a panel of physicians that can be, the employer can have a panel of physicians to offer to the worker to diagnose the PTSD. And so when I was saying that, I'm referring to treating like every other worker. It would be actually when you're in front of the commission, not because you could have expected the condition, circumstances, doesn't preclude you from receiving benefits. Is kind of what you're saying.
Okay, so just one follow-up.
Senator Evans.
In your analysis, I'm assuming this panel process is working for the other types of workers?
I'm sorry, can you repeat?
Are we assuming, or is it right that that the panels for other workers are presumed to be adequate and functioning well?
Yeah, it's not something we didn't hear any issues with that. It's mainly the fact that they're, just because they could have expected the circumstances to occur, they were being precluded from receiving benefits at all. So,
thank you.
Senator Vogel.
Madam Chair, I was just going to respond to Senator Hanger's question, but I think I will leave that until we actually hear the bills. But it was important to make that distinction that one is a presumption bill and one is not and does not have the same consequences. Thank you.
Are there further questions? If anyone would like to go further in depth into the JLARC study, it's online. You can find it real easily. So, okay. Is there any other business? Thank you very much.
thank you.
Oh, yes. Okay. Sorry. We have, yesterday, we didn't finish the presentation on the budget, and we will complete it now.
Yeah, they're treated like everybody else. Nope.
Yes. Yep, you got it. Thank you. Appreciate it. Come on now. There we go. Thank you, Madam Chair. So continuing on where we left off yesterday with an overview of the introduced budget and beginning with SB 29, the caboose bill for adjustments to FY20. Yes, and I'm sorry, I'll also add too that the tab 6 is where it starts. I believe it's page 76 rather, in the binders with the yellow cover. If you didn't bring it, there was another one provided for you. And again, I believe general government starts on page 76.
There's a paper copy provided for you if you didn't bring your.
Oh, I'm sorry. There's a paper copy provided for you if you didn't bring your binder. Okay, so just to quickly begin, there was $2.3 million added in additional criminal fund appropriation for both the general district courts and the JDR courts due to increased case volume and utilization of court-appointed attorneys' fees and other expenses out of the criminal fund. There's a $250,000 proposal for DHRM to initiate an initiative to evaluate pay equity throughout state government. And then there was also $5.9 million for the reimbursement to localities and Department of Elections for the 2020 presidential primary expenses. Looking at finance and central appropriations, so there's a voluntary revenue reserve deposit of $270.8 million, but I will say that there was a cash balance error that occurred that was identified after the budget had been introduced. You're probably familiar with this, but that is going to it reduces the uncommitted reserves that could be put into the revenue reserve, and it's going to reduce it to $191.7 million for that voluntary deposit. There's also removal of the prepayment for the rainy day fund deposit, just based on how revenues came in. It's not anticipated there will be a deposit required for FY22, and then there was some debt service savings of $11.5 million based on actual issuances of VCBA and VPBA debt. There's $15 million to support legal expenses, and it's kind of vague, but it's It's expected to be settlements related to cases in the Departments of Health and Corrections. And then you see the other side of the presidential primary expenses. There's an adjustment for PEMIS charges, which is more technical in nature, just based on agency utilization. So moving forward to the big bill in SB 30, judicial and executive, there's that same criminal fund appropriation increase for the general district and JDR courts. There's a proposal to add a total of 60 district court clerk positions over the biennium. They're pretty low in terms of staffing. I think they're 276 positions below where they should be in terms of staffing standards, so there's a fraction of that proposal. There's the additional judgeship in the 19th Judicial District, and that also actually has funding for an additional clerk position in the 19th as well. There's a proposal for 59 new public defender positions, as well as to establish a new public defender office in Prince William County. So there are currently 25, I believe, and this would be the first public defender office, new public defender office since 2005. And that's $2.7 million each year. And there should be, I'll say there should be a little bit of a reduction in court-appointed attorney's fees as a result from opening a public defender's office as well. There's an annualization of paralegal costs for the Indigent Defense Commission as well from something that was put in Chapter 4 to add 20 positions, and that's more technical in nature, just to true it up. And there's funding of $600,000 each year for both for the Office of the Chief Diversity Officer, Chief Workforce Officer, and the Secretary of the Commonwealth. There would be 3 positions to establish the Chief Diversity Officer's office, and then in the other, for the Chief Workforce Officer, that would be establishing general fund appropriation for 3 positions, I believe, associated with that. And then Secretary of the Commonwealth's office, that is just for pay increases and some additional staffing. So looking at administration, there's a proposal to increase the salaries of regional jail officers consistent with the local deputies. There was an action that was done in 2018 that increased the starting salary. It excluded regional jail officers, so this is trying to capture that additional group so there's parity between the classes of jail officers. There's a circuit court clerk salary increase as well as staffing and technology funding provided. Annualization for the Prince William Manassas jail expansion project, general constitutional officer salary adjustments, and additional positions, and specifically with respect to the additional Commonwealth's attorneys' positions and sheriff's positions, that would be 25% of the staffing standards based on the 2019 staffing standards, 25%, and I think that's coincidentally 29 positions in both groups. And there's also funding for the Henry County Jail expansion project, which was approved. The construction dollars were approved a couple of years ago, and that was completed in November of last year. And then there is non-general fund funding for the Chief Data Officer, and that's going to be facilitated through a chargeback by VITA that's charged out to agencies based on their volume of data storage with VITA. And then there is $6.1 million non-general fund to reflect the enhanced security in state-owned facilities. And then MOU is established between DGS and Capitol Police to hire more security screeners and security officers, and that is an internal service fund charge. So as part of that is charged out to the agencies via their rent cost. Moving on, General Registrar Electoral Board salaries. The reimbursement to localities for Electoral Board salaries would increase to 100% versus where they're at now at about 69% and 80% respectively for the General Registrars and Electoral Board members. And there's a transfer of the Management Fellows Program from Central Appropriations into Administration, and you see the appropriation there and a little bit of an increase, as well as the interns and the Governor's Fellows are moved under DHRM from a budget and administrative standpoint, but they would still be housed within the Office of the Governor. There is funding for a request for a new recruitment management system. And then you see the adjustment to VITA rates, $23.3 million, which is reflective of the transition to the new multi-supplier model, and then all the payments of disentanglement from the previous IT vendor and lower pass-through payments with the new vendors. And then a variety of requests through general services for rent adjustments, EVA procurement, lab testing at DCLS, collectively $14.9 million and 10 positions. and then a proposal to establish a new HR service center, internal service fund through DHRM, so that would be moving out their general funds for that operation. In finance, there are the mandatory and voluntary deposits, the rainy day fund. So mandatory is the first year amount of 77.4, and there's a voluntary 300 voluntary, or 317.5 is the voluntary amount in the second year. There's an increase of debt service of $171.7 million. And there is the removal of $42 million in general fund for transportation debt service that would be supplanted with transportation debt dollars. And then there are two proposals to add audit staff in the northern region, as well as a worker misclassification audit staff, which is in relationship to the 1099. I believe the 1099 forms that to make sure that there's compliance with that requirement. There's an increase, non-general fund dollars, increase in liability insurance premiums of $2 million a year, as well as some language that would provide cyber coverage for state agencies, and I believe there's probably a relationship between the increase in the premiums and that cyber coverage. Looking at benefits, no salary actions for state employees other than teachers in the budget, but this is reflective of the VRS costs, and that is inclusive of the 25 basis point discount and a reduction in the discount rate, and the adjustment to the state health plan premiums, the employer share, so that's 2.4%, and then 6.7% in the second year, so that's nearly $67 million. And then the second table on below just shows the different rates for the different plans in VRS. Looking at technology, again, there's the big reduction in VITA rates, and again, reflective of just disentanglement and the new vendor pass-through payments. So those would stabilize after that big drop. Those are going to stabilize over time. I will say it's also inclusive of about nearly $38 million in requests through VITA for new positions to manage the multi-supplier environment and a variety of different proposals. And then there's $2.5 million to repay EO19 compliance through a line of credit that was provided last year, and then a small adjustment for IT auditors and security officers. Quickly going through central appropriations, there's the $200 million in uncommitted contingencies. There's the reinsurance program for a prospective state health benefit exchange that would be in State Corporation Commission. That's $146 million. I will say there was a technical amendment that brought down, or an executive amendment that brought down the first year amount by about $37 million, I believe. Additional funding for tech talent, $30.4 million. HCM, so new Cardinal Human Capital Management System replaced all the existing HR systems that previously existed that were outdated, and that payment reflects the charge out to agencies from Cardinal, from DOA, as well as a repayment of $142 million working capital advance that was used to develop that system. There is a workforce case management system, $6.1 million, funding for the Redistricting Commission, funding for VDEM for IFLOWS, which is the flood warning system, and then $1 million for the Slavery and Freedom Heritage Project, and then a reduction in ticker appropriations of $100 million NGF over the biennium. Those are just the adjustments, line agency adjustments that were distributed throughout the budget to the agencies for various charges. Quickly looking at the independent agencies, on the top two general fund programs that would be in the Workers' Compensation Commission, specifically the Criminal Injuries Compensation Fund, and that is establishing appropriation for provider payments for medical evaluations for victims of sexual assault, and then transferring the appropriate net zero transfer of the appropriation for the PERC funds from where they existed within the judicial area of the budget into the Virginia Victims Fund. In the SEC, there you see on the first line, that's the establishment of the Health Benefit Exchange, and those are non-general fund dollars that would be paid for through carriers on the prospective plan. There is funding for oversight of education loan servicers in 2 positions, and then a variety of requests for data security, fraud prevention, and so forth, 10 positions through in the Virginia College Savings Plan. Lottery, new retail and operating equipment, $3.5 million, and then a variety of proposals in VRS, totaling 18 positions, 3 of which would be in-house private investment activities. expanding those. And Madam Chair, that concludes my portion of the presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. Madam Chair, Senator Zaslow, that would be, my understanding, that would be one primary. It's just the 2020 presidential primary.
Madam Chair.
I have no comments, sir.
Thank you, Adam. I heard this the other morning, and I asked about the primary, but I forgot to ask you, what about the general election? I was asking about lines, but are there any increased costs that we have to deal with for the general election, or is it just because we're having a primary?
Madam Chair, Senator Eben, there may be increased costs. I don't think those are addressed specifically in the budget, in the introduced budget. There's funding for IT security positions. I think there are just two or three proposals, but nothing that would specifically address increased volume, increased turnout related to the election.
Thank you. One more, Madam Chair. I'm sorry. What about if we pass the no excuse absentee voting? I know there's a budget amendment in, but was that already in the budget? Or maybe there's not?
It actually, I don't believe, and I don't believe a FIS was out for any of the bills, because there were several bills related to that. And looking at last year's FIS, it was considered by the Department of Elections that would be routine cost. But again, maybe they hadn't anticipated a level of turnout that you might expect in 2020. I don't know. But last year, I think it was just a few $1,000s, and they usually consider those routine and can be absorbed within the agency's budget.
Thank you.
Thank you. I will quickly go through capital outlay. I'm not going to do the additional summary slides beyond this one. I'm just going to focus on what was in Senate Bill 29, the caboose bill, and Senate Bill 30. There were only a handful of actions in 29 of $109 million. Most of that was there's an additional pod or unit on Central State Hospital under behavioral health. If you focus on Senate Bill 30, what I'll mainly say is it's total of $3.7 million in capital, which is a much larger number than we would typically probably see in 1 year. And it's $2.4 million in Virginia Public Building Authority and Virginia College Building Authority tax-supported bonds. And so I'll mainly focus on that, but there is some general fund cash for some planning projects as well. And then some 9C revenue bonds, which are the higher ed institutions when they do something like a dining facility. You'll see a bill that comes through the committee that I believe the chair is carrying on 9C debt that requires a financial feasibility study signed by the governor. The 9D revenue bonds are additional higher ed, but don't have that same level or threshold or vote, and they do not require a financial feasibility study. But both of those are backed by revenue, or they're revenue bonds because they're backed by a specific source at that institution to support those bonds. So mainly of the big debt numbers, there's $780 million for 23 projects from the Virginia College Building Authority. So those are the higher ed projects. There's almost $19 million for the Virginia Public Building Authority projects, and that's mainly things like the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts expansion, a Northern Virginia Regional Science Center, and Jamestown Yorktown Pier. There's $260 million in debt for the Central Maintenance Reserve, so projects at the institutions or the agencies where they're repairing things and they're at a much smaller level. There's $93 million for furnishings and equipment for projects that are nearing completion, that are coming online in the next 18 months. When we fund a project for construction, we pull out the equipment typically and come back and fund it later. And then there's $73 million for some capital infrastructure improvements, $22 million related to the tech talent proposals at the institutions, so some lab renovations and those types of things there. And then there's $367 million related to local water quality and supply projects. $65 million of that is from the CSO, or Combined Super Overflow Matching Fund for the City of Alexandria. There's almost $6 million for supplements to previous capital projects if costs have increased. And then there's $477 million in standalone projects under the agencies. That $23 million in cash there at the bottom I mentioned for project planning. You can't bond detailed planning for a project. You can construct a project and come back and have the, cover the whole cost, but you can't bond just planning. So there are 15 projects for that general fund cash, and then there are another 6 projects with non-general fund authority for detailed planning. And I only mention that because of the larger number of debt that's included in this budget. It might be a concern that as you plan new projects, those plans might become old before we move forward with construction. And Madam Chair, that concludes my presentation. Though if members are on the committee are particularly interested in more of these details, we will be covering that on Friday at the Capital Outlay Subcommittee meeting at 8 a.m., and that's in the Subcommittee Room 1 on the 5th floor. Thank you.
Is there any more business to come before the committee? The committee will rise.